Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And speaking of books, I have two of my own books coming out this spring and summer. Princess Charming is a picture book, which debuts on April 19th, and Bookends, a memoir of love, loss, and literature, comes out on July 1st, and it is truly a labor of love. I hope you'll pre-order, order, and join me on tour as I go across the country. You can find out more at zibbyowens.com or bookendsmemoir.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at zibbyowens because I always post about everything. Enjoy the show. Hillary Jordan and Cheryl Lu-Lien are co-editors of Anonymous Sex. Hillary Jordan is the author of the novels Mudbound, which, by the way, was a Netflix show which my brother ended up producing, and When She Woke. Mudbound was an international bestseller that won multiple awards and was adapted into a critically acclaimed Netflix film that earned 4 Academy Award nominations. Hillary is also a screenwriter, essayist, and poet whose work has been published in the New York Times, McSweeney's, and Outside Magazine, among others. She lives in Brooklyn, New York. Cheryl Lu-Lien is author of the international bestsellers Sarong Party Girls and A Tiger in the Kitchen, a memoir of food and family. She is also the editor of the fiction anthology Singapore Noir. Cheryl was a staff writer at the Wall Street Journal, InStyle, and the Baltimore Sun. And her stories and reviews have also appeared in the New York Times, the Times Literary Supplement, the Paris Review, the Washington Post, and Bon Appetit, among others. Born and raised in Singapore, she lives in New York City. And actually, her partner owns and runs a restaurant on the Upper West Side. So after you listen to this podcast, when I say I'm going to stop by the restaurant, I actually did. I went there that very night, or maybe it was the next night, and got to know her and her partner and all of their friends. And we've been back a few times, and it was super fun. And I just think she's awesome. I'm very excited today. I have two authors, Hillary Jordan and Cheryl Lu-Lien. Did I say that right? Lu-Lien? Yes. Anyway, Anonymous Sex, amazing anthology with a super unique concept, which I am just in love with. It's so cool. Will both of you introduce yourselves and then please explain how this project came to be?
Cheryl?
Well, this is Cheryl, and I am originally from Singapore. I have written fiction and nonfiction. My first book was A Tiger in the Kitchen. It was a food memoir about going back to Singapore to discover the food of my grandmothers. And then my novel was called Sarong Party Girls, which was about what it's like being a modern woman in Asia. And both were international bestsellers. And now we have Anonymous Sex.
Congratulations.
And I'm Hillary Jordan, and my first novel, Mudbound, was the winner of the Bellwether Prize for socially engaged fiction. And it was made into a movie that did pretty well. It got 4 Academy Award nominations.
Oh my gosh, my brother produced that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Which brother?
His name is Teddy Shoresman. He's from Black Bear Pictures.
I met Teddy. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, too funny.
I met him at the shoot, actually, and he gave me a lift back to New Orleans.
Oh, so, well, there you go.
Yeah. But yes, so that was really exciting. And my second novel is called When She Woke, and it's a dystopian novel that's sort of coming true. And I'm also a screenwriter. So, yeah. And this project started because Cheryl and I love food, and we also love erotica. So when we were introduced many years ago by Julia Glass, who was our very first contributor who signed up for this wonderful project, we discovered we had these shared interests. And over dinner one night, we were just talking about, why isn't there more really great erotica like D.H. Lawrence and Anais Nin? And we thought, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if we made a book like that? And we did it with some of the very best writers in the world, all writing at the top of their game. And then it was a matter of, okay, well, how do we get these amazing people like Louise Erdrich, Paul Theroux to sign on to this project? And we thought, well, what if we just list their names, but all the stories are anonymous, so you have to guess who wrote what. And we would call this project of ours Anonymous Sex.
And even though we came up with this idea about 7 or 8 years ago, time passed. Hillary would say, hey, let's do that project now. But I would be busy working on a book, or I'd be like, hey, I'm free now. And she'd be working on something. So the stars never really quite aligned until the pandemic happened. And suddenly it was, it was summer of 2020. We were all in lockdown. And I was at home in Singapore, my childhood bedroom in my mom's home in this strict lockdown for 2 months. And I was on a FaceTime call with Hillary, who was then in her own isolation in Maine. And we were like, why don't we do it now? We really have the time now. And, we thought if there were ever a time that the world needed to be reminded of intimacy and sex at a time when you couldn't even hug your own friends, couldn't see them, this would be it. And so we thought, okay, well, let's see what happens. And so we invited Julia Glass. She was the first ask, and she was an immediate yes. I called her on FaceTime from Singapore. And from then on, we just made a wish list. We just dreamt big, and we managed to get so many of the names that we had on that list. And we were so amazed. And I think it was partly because it was a time when people were really seeking connection.
And I'm just going to read the amazing contributors, if that's okay, for people who do not have the book in front of them. So your contributors include Robert Olin Butler, Catherine Chung, Trent Dalton, Heidi W. Duro, Tony April, Louise Erdick, Jamie Ford, Julia Glass, Peter Godwin, Hillary Jordan, Rebecca Mackay, she was on my podcast, Valerie Martin, Dina Nayari, Chigozie Obioma, Tia Obrecht, Helen Oyeyami, Mary Louise Parker, Victoria Radel, I'm sure I'm butchering all these names, Jason Reynolds, S.J. Roseanne, Meredith Taliesin, I did a IG Live with her, Cheryl Lu-Lien 10, Sue Vankam, Thamavangsa, Jeet, Thail, Paul Thoreau, Luis Alberto Uria, and Edmund White. How did I do?
That's amazing.
Thanks. That is quite a list of literary superstars. I mean, that's amazing. And by the way, Julia Glass, I loved the novel 3 Junes. Same Julia Glass, right?
And she has a new one coming out, Vigil Harbor, on May 3rd. So you should have her on too.
No way. Shoot. How did I not know that? Okay, I'm writing that down. I went a long time ago before I even had kids. I went to some sort of literary event for her at someone's home in Brooklyn Heights. And I didn't have kids, and everybody, the whole dinner was talking about their kids and their schools and St. Anne's and this and that. And I was sitting there being like, I don't understand. I have nothing to add. Like, I want to hear about the book and all this stuff. And now that I'm a mom, I'm like, oh, I get it. It was just a bunch of school moms with like a fabulous guest in there. I don't even know what I was doing there, come to think of it. I have no idea. Maybe it was a pen event or something. But anyway, I was such a huge fan. I went and met her, and it was so cool. And it's one of my favorites. And now it's like all coming full circle. Here you are. Okay, so now I'll have to have her on. Amazing.
And she is the nicest person, and her story in the collection is wonderful. But we can't tell you which one it is, of course.
Have you revealed who wrote what to anyone on the planet?
We're not allowed to. We're all contractually bound to keep it secret for a year and a half after publication what our story is. And in fact, there are a handful of people who know. Our editor, Cara Watson, knows. But she actually read the story blind, all the stories blind. She wanted to sort of come to it the way a reader would. And she was really confident that she would be able to guess, a lot of the names, because she's obviously very familiar with many of these authors. And she got 2 out of 27 right. So, but other than Cara and our editor in the UK and like the payroll person who cut the check, there's almost nobody who knows any of the names. So.
How does it feel for you guys to walk around with a big secret like that? I have a really hard time keeping secrets. They kind of weighs on me.
I don't know about Hillary, but I have like an armed personnel now following me around in case I get kidnapped and interrogated. But it's interesting because some of our writers say, obviously, I mean, so we're not hiding behind, the secrecy or anonymity, but at the same time, it's this kind of fun literary parlor game. And some of the contributors say that they never want to reveal it just because, it's kind of fun to be in this bubble of, just sort of secrecy and not having people know.
What happens after a year and a half? Then you're going to tell everybody?
The people's right to publish it in an anthology reverts to them, okay. But there's not going to be any sort of big announcement. And personally, I'm going to take it to the grave. And I hope a lot of the other writers follow suit, because the more that are identified, the easier it gets to identify the remaining people. So I think most of our writers are approaching it in the sense of, we're in this together and it's a secret.
Wow. Well, in the introduction, when you described why you did the project and all that, you had something that was super interesting about sort of love and sex in the pandemic that I thought, which sort of echoes what you were just saying now. But, I loved this last part of it too, but this is not what I was talking about, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. In thinking about how to describe the collection, we kept coming back to the last line of Altitude Sickness, the 4th story in the anthology. She grabbed the man's hand and kissed him without shame as the plane began to tilt. While the world has certainly been more at tilt than usual recently, the truth is it's always tilting in ways large and small for each one of us. Sex can be a grounding force in that day-to-day pitch. It can also be part of the upheaval. Either way, it's a connection many of us both want and need, a way to reach across the divide and know that we aren't alone, which is what inspired us to take this leap together. We hope you enjoy every eloquent, provocative, delicious word. I love that. I love that. I mean, people don't often talk about it that way, that it's unifying, that it's something that we have to hold on to. I had an anthology that I worked on at the same time called Moms Don't Have Time To, a quarantine anthology, which I originally just put essays out on my website because it was supposed to be another project. It doesn't matter. Anyway, one of the essays was by Claire Gibson, who's an author, and it was about her sex life with her husband and how he was such a germaphobe and how that affected their relationship, but how the part of it that really stayed with me is just they're sort of glomming onto each other and how those moments, those intimate physical moments, stopped time in a way and stopped all of the panic and the uncertainty and everything and just got them back in the moment so much. And, so the power of that, which of course is throughout the story, although they have lots of very salacious things in here. But that theme, it is so important. And that's one of these joking things why I have Moms Don't Have Time to Have Sex is one of the things in my anthology. Because, without those moments of reconnection to the people you love, without it, there might not be people. Now we have advanced science.
It's true. We have a lot of different kinds of sex in there. We have sex with ghosts, holographic sex. We have, bad sex, bondage sex, good sex, but we have a lot of good married sex too. One of my favorite stories in the book involves a teacher she's in school and she catches her daughter having sex in the supply closet, and then she comes home and she's just really frazzled, and then she's just sort of oh, I have all this grating, and then her husband is in the kitchen holding a piece of cheese, and he's like, let's go, and if you want to read the story, you have to buy the book. But it's this moment between just sort of this really happy married couple, and it's this stress point in her life that suddenly just gets lifted.
Also, in what was the name of this one? History lesson about the two people at the conference where Michael, I think his name's Michael, was threatening to reveal all these videos of the two of them when both of them are basically cheating on their partners, some sanctioned, some not, and then revealing on Twitter this very intimate moment and then having to go back to the conference. This is my worst nightmare. Basically, I can't even think of anything more terrifying than having your most intimate and the scene where she's pulling off her necklace, oh no, maybe the necklace is going to give it away. Anyway, what did you guys think when you got that story, for instance? How did it happen? Did they send it to you in Google Docs, or you got it on email? Did you read it on your computer, and were you just oh my gosh, this is amazing? And then how much editing went into it? What was that all like?
That was actually a joy to get. Actually, all of them were, because when we commissioned this, we invited people. So we did not ask for we didn't ask for people to submit blindly. We invited people specifically, and we said we want a sex story between 1,000 words and 8,000 words. That's all we told them. So we were kind of worried when it got close to deadline. What if we get 25 stories about the same kind of sex? What if we get 25 stories about, sex in a park in New York? But then, we invited such a variety of writers. They've been finalists for the Booker Prize. They've won the Pulitzer Prize. They've won the National Book Award. We have a children's author who won the Carnegie Medal in the UK. So, obviously we ended up getting a huge range. But, when we got that story, we were like, wow, we were blown away by all of them. But that one, we were like, okay, this is really steamy. It's really hot. And it really is. I felt like, I know this writer. I can't reveal who it is. And I was just like, wow, this is really something like nothing I've ever read from this person before. And it made me feel really happy, because it was exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to kind of open the door to maybe ask people to go down a road with us that perhaps they'd never gone before. And ourselves included, Hillary and I both have a story in it.
Wow. But you'll never say what yours is either.
Never.
Of course.
No. Okay. You guys are good. You're really good. Tell me for a second about the cover. So the cover, for people listening, is bright red, and there is one plump, delicious looking strawberry right in the middle with its little green leaves at the top. Tell me about that, how much input you had, what you wanted it to look like, and how that came to be.
Well, that is one very wicked looking strawberry for those of you who haven't seen the cover of the book.
And I will hold it up for it.
Suggests quite a lot of different things, we think. We really like that it was suggestive in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one other cover that they showed us, which was actually 2 lemons. But we loved our wicked strawberry because it's fun, and that's also part of what this project was. In addition to sort of intimacy and connection, we wanted it to be fun. I mean, we were all the writers craving something fun during that time. I mean, this was before vaccines, when we started conceiving this and when people were writing these stories. And, sex is fun. And it really helped me get back into writing. I mean, I was pretty paralyzed the first few months of the pandemic. And I'm single, so I was by myself for a long time. And, Cheryl and I have talked a lot about how this project really helped get us through. Mm-hmm. But for me personally, I hadn't written a word of fiction until I began my story. And so it was a fun project, and it was just delightful. And we love that the American cover reflects that.
And the UK cover is very different.
Ooh, look at that.
I know. So it's kind of this, I know a friend of mine, he said, I tried to scan this QR code and Tinder popped up. It does not. But I like how you turn it around. You keep seeing different things.
That's cool.
Yeah. But so I love that we have 2 wonderful covers. And the strawberry, what I love about it is it's very inclusive. It's very broad because it could be thighs, it could be behind, it could be the front. It could be anything really. So it's very inclusive.
Yes. Very inclusive. Interesting. Never eat a strawberry the same way again. Tell me, though, about both of your backgrounds a little more not related to this book and how, what your projects are now that you're working on, not related to this, but screenwriting, or if you're doing another book yourself and all that. And now I have to go back and I really want to read your memoir. I love food-related memoirs and all that. I have to go back. I will do that. And I'm excited to. And just really excited about Mudbound and all the rest. So just tell me more about your careers and how you became writers.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I actually started out as an advertising copywriter. So I spent, 20 years writing disposable sentences. I mean, I did some good ads, but, and I was in my early to mid 30s and I was living in Texas and I was married to the wrong person. And I just woke up one day and I was working 60-hour weeks and making a lot of money. And I just woke up one day and I just said, this can't be my life, because it just didn't feel worthy of how I wanted to spend my time. So I went back to school. I went to Columbia and got my MFA and started Mudbound. Actually started both of my novels in the same workshop, the January of the second workshop I took. And I didn't know what to do with the other one. And I wrote Mudbound, which was very loosely based on family stories of my grandparents' farm, where they lived after World War II. And the cast of characters is actually pretty similar in terms of the makeup. There's a couple with 2 young daughters, a crotchety, father-in-law, and this handsome soldier who comes home from the war a little bit traumatized. So that much is true. But, nobody killed my great-grandfather, although I think my grandmother might have liked to, and, just other things that happened. So that book was my first novel, and it just did so well. And it won, it won an award and sort of changed everything. And then while that was happening, I wrote the second one. And then when years passed, obviously, and when Mudbound got made into a film, I sort of caught the screenwriting bug. So I actually have done an adaptation of When She Woke, which is now searching for a director, if you know anybody. And I'm about to embark on another screenwriting project about the Texas prison rodeo. And I'm also working on a third novel. So quite busy these days.
Wow. How do you go back to the intensity of into the characters' lives when you're doing so many, it feels like novel writing takes a certain mental headspace. It's not the same as, an essay. I mean, not that doesn't.
Yeah.
But how do you go back and forth?
I read somewhere once that Philip Roth spent most of his time towards the end in his house in Connecticut because when he was writing anyway, because he said he needed to be in touch with his characters every day. And it was kind of hard to do that in New York because you get distracted, you go to Zabar's and it's exciting. And all of a sudden it's like, so I can kind of see that,
residencies help a lot, artist residencies. And Cheryl and I both have done those. And I'm actually going back to one that we have in common, Yaddo, in a few weeks for a month. So you get a month where it's just, and that helps a great deal.
I went to the Yaddo benefit right before the pandemic where they were reading all sorts of letters by the most iconic, amazing authors who had been there in the past, and not just authors, but all sorts of just so many amazing, notable people, and what Yaddo had meant to them. It was crazy. It was like sitting through a history thing. Yeah. It was just so cool. Yaddo, I really would love to go at some point just to take a little tour or something. Anyway.
Well, Yaddo was a huge turning point for me. I mean, for me, I always knew I wanted to write books. I grew up in Singapore in a very traditional Chinese family. And so when I said I wanted to write books when I was 5 or 6, because I've been reading Enid Blyton and Judy Blume, and I just, I wanted to write things like that could take people somewhere else. And my parents were like, well, people who write, how do you make money doing that? Like, no, you're going to be a lawyer. And so I said, well, okay, well, what if I figure out how to make money with writing? And so I was like, I'm going to become a journalist. They have regular paychecks. So I went to journalism school, loved it, worked for the Baltimore Sun, went to InStyle magazine. I was a fashion editor there. And then the Wall Street Journal, I covered fashion. And I had been covering fashion for like 10 years and living in the US, and my family's all in Singapore. And I was starting to really miss eating food of my family. And especially, I think it was particularly acute because I was surrounded by people in an industry in fashion where they were actively avoiding food and eating. And so all of a sudden I started really craving my grandmother's food and my mom's food. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to take a break and go home and learn how to cook with my aunties for a weekend. And so I did that, and I wrote an essay, and an editor called me and said, from Penguin called and said, let's turn this into a book. And so that's literally how everything started. And I remember I got the book contract. I had this book to write. I didn't know how to write it. I remember saying, if you ask me to write a 1,500 word story in an hour, I can do it, hands down. But you asked me to write a 90,000 word book in a year, I have no idea where to start. And so going to Yaddo really, really helped me because it kind of cleared my head. It kind of showed me how to be an artist because I was around other writers. I saw how disciplined they were and how they worked. And that really helped me. That's how I wrote. I was actually at Yaddo for 7 weeks, and I wrote A Tiger in the Kitchen. My first book was a food memoir at Yaddo. And then before I was done with that, I started writing what would become my first novel, Sarong Party Girls, which is also set in Singapore. And it's about young women in Singapore and, just how difficult it can be to be a woman in modern but patriarchal Southeast Asia.
Wow. So amazing. You two are so accomplished, and this is so inspiring. What a story. Amazing. And how about you? What else is coming up for you?
Well, I'm working on my next novel right now. So apart from Anonymous Sex, all my books have been set in Singapore, and the next one is too. So I'm not saying very much about it, but it's got some sex in it. So,
and in the meantime, you help your boyfriend with his restaurant.
Well, I write there every day. So if you come to Manny's Bistro at 225 Columbus on the Upper West Side, I am literally at the little table by the door. But if I look busy, if I'm typing and I have my earbuds in, don't talk to me. But if I don't have my earbuds in, it's okay to talk to me. But that's where I work on my book these days because the tea is free flowing, and anytime I'm hungry, the kitchen is right downstairs.
That's so neat. I'm not even kidding. I'm going to just come and have dinner there at night or something. You'll be surprised. Are you there at night too, or just during the day?
I'm often there at night too. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Cheryl is the hostess with the mostest. She's the most social person. It's just the perfect thing for her.
I love it. Oh my gosh. That's always been a dream that you could have a restaurant and just hang out there and greet everybody. And I don't know. Very neat. Okay. From both of you, what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
My first piece of advice would be to read a lot of great books, because I feel like reading authors, Judy Blume, Roald Dahl as a child, and, right on up to Jane Austen and Kazuo Ishiguro, to name two of my favorites. I don't see how you can become a writer without doing a lot of reading. I mean, and reading good stuff, too. So that's kind of my number one piece of advice. And the second thing that I always tell people is to read your stuff out loud, because your ear will pick up wrongnesses that your eye will not catch on the page. So those are my two big ones.
I would second both of those. Definitely read a lot. I read a lot as a kid. My family had to pool their library cards to get the maximum amount each week just for me. And also the reading aloud thing, particularly because my first book, I write in Singapore, we speak a kind of patois that's a mix of Chinese, English, and Malay. And so for me, I sometimes read aloud as I'm writing, just because I need to hear it. Mm-hmm. But also, I think the main thing is listen, be a great observer of life. And I think that's why a lot of journalists make really good novelists, because that's what we have to do. We have to bring a scene to life on the page. And, for me, like when I read a book and I'm like, something's not quite right. Like this character, it's because this person hasn't understood the character or doesn't understand the environment or doesn't understand the community that they're writing about. And they're just sort of inserting themselves into it or their beliefs into it. And so to me, I always enter a thing going, I don't understand what this world is. So I have to know everything. I have to know what the wallpaper is, what it smells like, what this woman likes for breakfast, what's her favorite ice cream, before I can really what you see on the page has to be the tip of the iceberg, because you have to really understand that world. You have to listen to your characters in order to actually bring them to life. Otherwise, they're going to come across as false.
And the other thing I would say that off of what Cheryl just said is that I always start novels with a question, as opposed to an answer. I mean, the process of writing a book is a process of asking questions. What would it be like if you're this educated woman and with two little tiny children, and your husband just moves you out into the middle of, BF, Mississippi, and you don't even have running water? Like, what would that be like? So I feel like going into a book, as Cheryl said, with curiosity and not knowing and being determined to know and to make discoveries allows your reader to do that eventually as well. And that feels really exciting when it's really happened. When I'm sensing that in a novel, that the author went through that, that's always really exciting to me.
And amazing. Also, if you live anywhere with a public transportation system, that's one of my favorite places to get ideas for either images or facial tics or whatever, or dialogue, because I'm always on the subway and I look at people who are like, not looking around them or have their earbuds in or they're talking to each other. And I go, you're missing out on this like grand pageantry of life around you. It's like, listen, you're going to hear dialogue, you're going to see people, you're going to see outfits and everything on the subway that you'll never see anywhere else. Like, you wouldn't have to make it up, just write it down.
It's so true. There's a lot to be learned just from watching and listening. Paying attention, observing. Secret weapon. Maybe not for erotica, but I don't know. I'll just leave that floating out there. Now I want to go back and try to, now that I feel like I know you two a little bit, figure out which essays you wrote. But anyway.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah, I probably will never be able to tell, which is probably good. I mean, whatever. Anyway, great to meet you. I hope to meet you both in real life since we're all in the city. And I'm sorry you weren't here and I have to start booking in-person interviews again. And who knows, I'll probably just show up at the restaurant. So
yeah, it's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok @with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi. Hi. Hello. Enjoy the show.